to look at the schools within New Orleans College Prep and talk about my vision, where I hope to see them in the next 3 years. So I started off looking at where we are. What does the current data tell us? Well, the current data tells us that COIN has a performance score of C, a graduation rate of 66%. And what that means is that in a 4-year time period, about 66% of the children who enter graduate in 4 years. 43% of the students are proficient or better on the end of course test. So we have a lot of work to do here. There was a lot of data on the website, but I did not want to inundate you with a whole lot of data. Right now we're looking at some critical aspects, and I think that these points really tell the story. Crocker has a performance score of D with a student proficiency rate of 15%. There's nowhere to go but up. 15% of the students are performing proficiently according to LEAP. I'm so happy that I had the conversations with the principals on yesterday. I did begin to look at this data, speak to them about it, and figure out why it looks like it looks, because we know that we do not have that many sub-average students in these buildings. Sylvania Williams has a performance score of F and a student proficiency rate of 8%. And whatever happens with that building, I did speak with Dr. Green, because we have students in that building, and we still have to test them in the spring, and they have to be educated as long as they are in the building. Hoffman Learning Center had a proficient rating, and I spent some time there yesterday. It was a great afternoon, and we did speak about her visits from the Louisiana Department of Education and where they need to go in terms of improvement. Now, where do we plan to be in 3 years? Well, with COIN, in 3 years, I believe they can have a performance score of A on LEAP and a graduation rate that is the same or better than the national average of 83%. So I project that. However, I've said it in all the interviews that I've had thus far, that I don't do things in isolation or a vacuum. I projected this, it was the assignment. But I like to work collaboratively with the people that are in the trenches, working in the buildings. We all work together and we come up collectively with the goals and objectives. That way you have buy-in. However, this is where I'm going to start with when I speak with the people in the building, because I have all the faith and confidence after meeting with the principals, visiting the classrooms, that this can happen. For Crocker College Prep, a performance score of A, no less than a B on LEAP assessments, and a student proficiency rate of at least 75% in all content areas. Well, you saw where they're starting from. And so that's a big delta. When we look nationally, and with schools that I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of schools in the past 5 years, and the proficiency rates normally are about 5 to 7%. And that's aggressive. However, I have seen schools make 10 and 15% gains. I have had schools that I've worked with make those kinds of gains in the content areas. So I believe with some with an RTI plan that we can have a proficiency rate of at least 75% in all content areas. Hoffman, I believe we can have a performance score of excellence on the early childhood performance rating with the Louisiana Department of Education. And I believe it more than ever after talking with the dynamic leader of the Hoffman Center. The things that I saw when I carefully reviewed the data from the Louisiana State Department of Education dealt quite a bit with compliance issues. There were compliance issues. There were some professional development needs in terms of providing support for teachers. But I also understand what's happening in our charter organizations. We follow different rules that really work for us, but sometimes they don't quite work for us the way we'd like them to. We realize that in these buildings, we don't have a cadre of certified teachers in every area. And that's probably why there's a need for that professional development for the people that don't have the pedagogy necessary to go in and do the job. We just need to look at a way to make it happen in that building to provide those teachers with the support that they need. And we've already begun to talk about that with those principals. I'd like to see all of the schools with an average daily attendance, at least the elementaries, of 95%, and 90% or above at the high school level. And right now we're looking at 80% at Cohen, and we're looking at somewhere in the 80s for the elementary. So I believe that this can happen. Pull in incentives for teachers and students. I also like to look at teacher attendance, but that was not part of the data. So hopefully if I'm selected, these are also data points that I will review. I did look at the data for behavior, but it was good. So I didn't feel like I needed to concentrate on it at this time. It can always go up. But right now, as you can see from the data points that have been presented so far, the immediate and concentrated need needs to be on student achievement. And that's where it's going to be. Okay. How will we get there? Well, I've looked at the current mission for New Orleans College Prep. But in looking at where the organization is in terms of how the buildings are preparing students moving forward, I do think we need to come together and revise or maybe even create a new vision for New Orleans College Prep. I can't say what that's going to look like now because I'd like to engage in a process with all of the staff in those buildings, the leadership, and even some of the stakeholders and the board to look at maybe making it more specific, looking at some different components. I don't know yet because, like I said, I don't like to do things in a vacuum or sit and do them alone because normally that doesn't work. Unless you have buy-in, things aren't going to happen. So I think once we get that done and we hash it out and come up with what we really want to see collectively for New Orleans College Prep, it will begin to happen. I'd also like a vision for each site that aligns with the New Orleans College Prep overall vision because we're doing something different in each one of those sites. So at the Early Childhood Center, it needs to focus more on what we do with early learning, early literacy, the very young child. At the elementary level, there are both elementary and middle school children. We probably want to look at something more specific there. And then with the high school, we're looking at really preparing the young people for college and career readiness. And how we do that, of course, we'll talk with the people in the buildings who are affected and doing it every day. I'd also like to conduct a comprehensive needs assessment because I'd like to look at what are the strengths and the challenges of each site specifically related to the data points. So assisting staff, because this is a very collaborative process as well, where you work with the staff and the leadership in the buildings to perform this task. Also assessing their systems. What are the systems in these buildings, the processes? What are their protocols, the practices they currently have in place that support student achievement? And then facilitating those school teams. Taking a deep dive into data also requires some training, and speaking with the principals, we understand that we have to work with our teachers and staff in the building so we can take that deep dive and look at different data points to come up with where our needs are and where we need to put our resources. And then I'd like to prioritize the areas for improvement. This is about a semester-long process. Once this process is done, we would write an executive summary and present it to the board moving forward. Additional preparation for this year's LEAP. I don't believe in going into anything as critical and important as LEAP to the future of this charter network without creating a sense of urgency, developing a specific plan, and looking at each site as it relates to the goals and objectives in a 5-week push prior to LEAP. So I'd like to see each site develop and implement a plan that will be launched at least 5 weeks prior to the administration, dealing with RTI. Now when we look at that, of course, we've been planning all year. We've been planning for student achievement. We've been delivering instruction. But have we looked at what we're doing when students don't learn? What's our reteach, retest plan? What are we doing? And so we take a close look at that, and we look at what did the students miss? What are the critical skills that they didn't get? And we create intervention plans. Sometimes we have to alter the master schedule because we have to provide interventions during the day to make sure that we give our students the ultimate opportunity to do well on LEAP. And then, as I said, all students receive this targeted intervention that will strengthen any skill deficit or any knowledge gap that they might have moving into this critical test. Another important component is goal setting and monitoring. Using the available data that we're going to get from the comprehensive needs assessment, and believe me, we'll be asking some very, very hard questions during this process. But it's not an I gotcha moment. It's a moment to say, we're in a team now, we're going to get it done and move forward. So we're looking at our available data, and we need to set SMART goals. The SMART goals need to be set for student achievement. We're looking at behavior and attendance. Of course, our teacher retention, I'm going to get into that just slightly a bit more, the climate and culture, and the parent, community, and stakeholder involvement. When you look at that SMART goal for student achievement, you're not just looking at it as a school or as it relates to LEAP. You're looking at SMART goals as they relate to grade level performance, and then individual classroom performance. Each teacher writes a SMART goal for where they feel they're going to bring their class at certain data points. So it's a very in-depth process. It takes more than a minute to do it, but unless you set goals and plans, nothing is going to happen the way it needs to happen. I'm very goal-driven, and I believe in setting plans, monitoring plans. That's what gets done. What gets monitored gets done once the plan is constructed. Teacher retention, I know there's a problem, and we all know why. It's just a different day with the charter movement. However, in talking with the principals, teacher retention is important because it does affect what happens in student achievement. We already know from the John Hattie research that the teacher is the single most important determinant in what happens with student achievement. So our teachers are important. The rubber meets the road with the teacher. We have to make sure that we retain our staff that can deliver results for student achievement. In the next 3 to 5 years, I'd like to see New Orleans College Prep gain 2 to 3 additional schools and provide choice and options for students, parents, and families. So I'd really like to see a viable feeder pattern developed for pre-K-12. Right now, students who go to Crocker don't necessarily go to Coyne, and I asked that in the student meetings yesterday. I'd like to work with these principals to craft a feeder pattern and to have students visit Coyne, meet teachers, see what the programs are offered there so that they want to go to Coyne. And because I've already looked at what's going on at Crocker and speaking with the principal there, and a lot of the students who enter at pre-K and first grade stay with Crocker all the way through 8th grade. So it's just normal that they would want to move forward to Coyne. However, we do have work to do because we have to have some carrots out there for the students in terms of why do you want to go to Coyne in terms of meeting your needs, meeting the needs of the greater community, meeting the needs of the students so that they have what they feel they need to go out and be college and career ready. I'd also like to develop a plan to increase enrollment by 10% for next school year, and that will also involve going into the community, selling the network, selling the school, maybe shoring up some things before we step out, but I think that we can increase enrollment going into the community and sharing the good things that are being offered and the plans that will be set in place to bring up the achievement levels in these buildings. I'd also like a true middle school in this pathway, because with a true middle school, you can offer sports programs, you can offer extracurricular activities and expanded course offerings for middle school students that you can't always do in a K-8 situation. Providing additional resources is important in a tough budget time, and of course, I've been with schools for the past, many years, and I've never had a year when we didn't sit around the table and look at how we were going to cut, how we were going to divide resources differently. So, in providing additional resources, I'd like to look at New Orleans College Prep University partnerships, the new ones, the existing, new and existing, create some new ones with universities. I know we have a great one here at Crocker with Tulane. Look at community organizations, expanding to some of the organizations, even Yes, even the, some of our social and pleasure clubs that do things for the community, and creation of a New Orleans College Prep Foundation, beginning base with the COIN alumni group. And I've seen this work very well. Coordinate and execute all the fundraising activities as well as donations, disperse the resources. When I've worked with foundations in the past, they've done things like put out mini grants to schools after they've raised money. Also do some things like a golf tournament, which brings in people. And I know even in Norfolk with our foundation, the first golf tournament, we raised $75,000. So there's a lot that can be done with the foundation. And also build and increase volunteer effort for New Orleans College Prep. And this works well because the foundation takes care of background checks and other things that are needed. And of course, it's going to require some organization, but I think in 6 months we can have something to kick off. Also, board relations, open and honest communication, commitment to adhere to policies and protocols, and then to develop a process. And this doesn't have to be anything cumbersome or anything we have to put a lot of time in, but I'd like to provide board presentations that are meaningful, that are relevant, the kinds of presentations you can use to assist you with your work, your decision making, some of the approvals that need to happen. And then budget. We have a current state of affairs that dictate budget cuts. That comprehensive needs assessment will provide some data relative to the needs, where are the needs, and then leadership will receive input from staff, because it's very important that we talk to everybody and get some input before cuts are made. So that's a promise I would make to be collaborative. Those are initial plans. By no means are they just comprehensive of everything that needs to happen, but in 20 minutes, I wanted to give you hitting the ground running. That's what I call it. Okay.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board in the open meeting here?
How long does a comprehensive needs assessment?
About a semester, because you're really taking a deep dive into data and coming up with some tough question and answers about the protocols, practices, and the systems that are in place in the schools. So it takes about a semester, and then we will present the executive board that can be shared with the community, and it can be put on the website, whatever you deem appropriate.
Yes, I have a follow-up question on the comprehensive needs assessment. Tell me a little about how you would manage it. Is it done from the top down? Is it done involving the community, or do you bring in consultants?
You don't have to bring in a consultant. I have a template. We have done this in the past. I've done it with the schools in Virginia. But it's a process very much for staff and administration in the building that can be led by the principals, by leaders on the leadership team. I can lead certain aspects of it. So it's something that is meaningful because it's done by the people in the school to be used by them and others, such as the board, to make sound decisions about the needs and the resources moving forward.
I was going to ask you, when you said we know why we have a teacher retention problem.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay, I will tell you, because the teacher retention problem, I believe, with the charter schools, and in talking with the principals yesterday, come about with the fact that we have people in buildings that are not certified for the positions, and we don't really provide contracts, long-term contracts. If you're in a regular school district, you're going to get a 3-year contract off the back.
And you
And
favor a 3-year contract?
I'm not saying I favor
Oh,
anything.
okay, okay.
I didn't say I favored a 3-year contract. You asked me a question, so I'm trying to provide, you with the answer that I'm thinking. So I think the teacher retention problem comes in because first of all, you don't have contracts. So if I'm in there without a contract and I know from year to year, I could be, removed at any time and I'm not certified. I might not choose to stay. I might choose to move around and go somewhere else, every year I'm moving to a different place. So I think that's been a huge part of the issue in terms of us being explicit with teachers as to what you can expect when you come to this charter network and what can happen in terms of your continuing employment with us. What's the criteria, the terms and conditions of your continued employment? And then, because I know also, we can also release people at any time. And that's something that you can't do in traditional school districts. So there are some nuances here, and it does make a difference in terms of teachers staying with you.
Do any of the charter management organisations in the world do long-term contracts with teachers?
Everyone in the state, by state law, from the principal to the teacher to the custodian, gets a 1-year contract. And you cannot relieve them without due cause. You can't
But it's
just
a
say
1-year
goodbye.
contract.
So we actually don't have contracts, we have offer letters. And then Louisiana is an at-will state, so kind of like what Barbara said, that, we can release people. Typically, NSCP would only do that if there was cause.
Yeah.
The public education in New Orleans has evolved from keeping tenured teachers, like one or two that I had in high school who were tenured, so they didn't come when they didn't want to come. And I'm not, I don't like to.
Well, it's a double-edged
I,
sword.
yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I
It's
don't
a
like to
double-edged sword.
generalize, but there, some problems can arise with when we had tenured teachers and,
Well, let me just state this. I'm not an advocate, one or the other, but, I believe that the principals and the people in the building, in order to get maximum student achievement, there's some stability that needs to happen. That's where I'm coming from. My whole goal is the child sitting in that classroom and what they deserve.
Right.
They deserve the best teachers that we can provide for them. So whatever it takes to have teachers that are going to give the students what they need. And I also believe that if teachers are on a roller coaster and every year they're leaving and coming in, so I'm not making it up that there's 30 to 40% teacher retention in these buildings. That is very difficult for principals to run a top-notch A#1 program when they have 30 and 40%. And I know because I was a principal for 15 years, and it was very, very difficult to have teachers come in and out. That was one of the goals that principals set for themselves, was how do we retain teachers, especially those who affect student achievement in a positive way. So that's the problem that I'm relating to. And that's the problem, I believe in problem solving and finding solutions to problems. So if this is a problem that principals are having, I'm willing to fight it tooth and nail. Anything I can do to help them, because part of the issue here is eliminating barriers so they can do the best job in the building for the babies and the students in that seat that we have to serve every day. That's where I'm coming from.
I just get, independent of you, Dr. Charbonnet, but since this is televised and we have the community here, is our teacher retention rate, do we lose 30 to 40% of our teachers every year?
Not historically at all. We did have a lot of teacher attrition last year at Sylvania Williams, so that
So
would
Maybe Williams.
correct. But overall, it was above 80%
Coming
retention
back.
rate at Cohen and Crocker.
Okay.
Well, that is not what is on the
Yeah, we
state
have
website for the, because that's the
Okay.
data on the website.
Yeah, and that's why I
So
wanted
that's
it,
what I did.
especially for the audience.
So
that
if
they
that's
didn't
not the
know.
real data now,
But
they
not all.
always use a year before.
I have.
So that's the data
Yeah,
that was used
and that's
on
not
the
your fault
website.
at all.
And so I
Independent-
picked that up, and
Yeah.
then I talked with the principals on yesterday, and, I will say, at Coin, you told me that you were doing better this year with teacher retention. But
Yeah.
I think at Crocker, we still talked about, there was some issue with teacher retention
We were at 91% last year.
last year.
And Crawford,
It was about 80% last
Okay.
year.
only for the clarification and not to point out you.
Yeah.
That's not your fault.
Well, I got it from the website,
Absolutely. Sorry.
from the lead.
Yeah, good.
One of the other things that sort of slightly intrigued me, you talked about a foundation. Why would you set up a foundation? We raise about $1 million a year from different sources right now that flows through to the organization. We are the foundation, so to speak, aren't we? I mean, I don't know what is the purpose of actually
A separate.
a separate
501c3.
foundation?
Because I've been asked that question by board members and others, that fundraising was an issue. So I'm believing that fundraising
Oh, yeah.
was an issue. So.
Well, I think we do better than a lot of schools, frankly.
Okay.
Child management organizations. But obviously we always need more money.
Well, and a foundation really can only enhance that, because then you have a group or a specific person that's dedicated to that all the time.
Yeah, we do that now.
Oh, you have that
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
you have a
yeah.
dedicated person?
Yeah, this is your technician.
Yeah, we always have, we always have.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that was not clear,
Yeah.
and in prior interviews, that has always come up as an issue. So it was a proposal,
Okay.
it was proposed
No, no,
as
I
a
was just
possible
intrigued
solution.
by what it was,
Okay.
what the advantage was of a
But
separate.
fundraising is critical, no matter how you do it. We know that.
So you mentioned Cohen alumni, we're not getting enough from the Cohen alumni these days? I'm the board chair, I'm allowed to.
Okay, I'm Cheryl Lewis, and it's my pleasure to meet you.
Yeah,
It's
nice to
really given us some time to speak, Mr. Board Chairman. In support of Dr. Charbonnet's plan, I would like the board to consider, with all of this fundraising that you said, the money is flowing through, question comes as to why are there no teaching assistants or tutors in the classroom to assist with the interventions that need to be done on a daily basis. As an educator, the teacher can't do it all. And so they need support. So if you're gonna fundraise and you have millions of dollars coming through, it looks like there should be a plan in place, and Dr. Charbonnet talked about interventions being a part of the structure of the educational plan and support of the teacher and the students in the school. Some money needs to be set aside to hire qualified people to come in to assist all day, not half a day, but all day, in support of that plan. And make sure that those people are not just people coming off the street who need a job, but are qualified to come in and assist. Now, you have retired teachers who can now go back to work to a large extent because the state had precluded us from doing so after retirement. If you retired before 2009, you could come back to work. But after that, you could not come back at all unless you were in a critical area. But now you have teachers who can come back, who are certified and qualified, that may be willing to come in and not take the responsibility of teaching a class per se and doing lesson plans, but come in to assist and support the classroom teaching. In addition, has the board looked at, or do you have somebody who is over instruction for several of your schools, or if you have a cadre, 3 schools here, 3 schools there, who can come in? I have been in situations where schools have been failing, and the supervisor of instruction, or assistant superintendent of instruction, has a 30-day review of every school And there were certain criteria set aside that they had to show where they were improving, and not just lip service. Documentation, pictures about what was going on in the classroom on a daily basis. So if you don't have anybody who's looking at instruction and assisting the principal and the CEO, the principal can't do it all. So you really need to consider looking at somebody who is going to take care of the instructional piece for each of your schools, or like I said, a cadre of schools. Because it's important that not just the teacher be the person in the classroom, but the parent also should be a support for the kids who are attending your schools. As an alumni of Cohen, we sit here tonight knowing that this is not the school that we went to, even though times have changed. We were an academia who excelled with band, football, cheerleaders, majorettes. We were appealing the community. Yeah, Xavier University sitting right there on Palmetto Street. Did the board consider maybe asking Xavier to ask some of their teachers who are training to come in and provide support as a part of their curriculum, to come in and provide tutoring assistance? It's a whole lot that can be done that Dr. Charbonnet is talking about, but it can also be added to a plan and looked at to provide the support that you need. Because if you're gonna get a $4 million building, you gotta show evidence to the state, because they'll let you build it, but they'll come and get it if these kids are not making the letter grades. And it's not about the test. They have to leave here knowing Xavier motto is leave prepared. Leave prepared. And that's what we want for our kids in this community. Thank you, Mr. Board Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we are now going, we've had the questions, so we're now going to go into executive session and do some more questions to you and so on. So I move.
I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session, but based, Dr. Charbonnet, have you received heard of the plan to go into executive session in advance? Did you get that notification? Did you object to that? So based on that, I'll make a